Welcome to today's CIT Tech for Business podcast. Today we're sitting down with Anne and Ashley and the marketing team, Kelsey and Tara, to discuss recognizing and reporting phishing. We're going to kick it off with just saying hi, letting us know by your voice who you are, and then answering today's lovely iceberg question, or icebreaker. It's Monday here while we're recording. I'm awake, I swear. What was your favorite childhood or still adulthood cartoon? I'll go first. I'm Kelsey. I'm a member of the marketing team, and my favorite had to be Scooby-Doo, which as an adult I did not realize didn't run for that many seasons because I felt like I watched it my entire childhood. You could rewatch it in a weekend. What about you, Tara?
As Kelsey said, my name is Tara. I'm also part of the marketing team, and by far, I have to say the Flintstones. I adored Pebbles and Bam Bam all the way. But Ashley, what about you?
I'm Ashley. I'm a member of the security team, cybersecurity analyst, and I would say my favorite cartoon as a kid was probably Animaniacs. I remember getting home from school every day and watching that show, and I've watched it now as an adult, and I've seen some more adult humor that I definitely missed as a child. What about you, Anne?
I was gonna say Animaniacs for sure. Hi, I'm Anne. Also on the security team, I do governance, risk, and compliance, but Animaniacs, absolutely. I feel like it's similar to Shrek, is like a precursor that it was absolutely hilarious as a kid. And now watching it again, I'm like, oh my gosh, there is all this fun stuff for entertainment of adults and kids alike. But I also used to come home religiously to watch DuckTales.
DuckTales.
Because it was after school.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Still randomly get that theme song stuck in my head sometimes.
Yep.
Yeah, now I was just going to say that. I was like, now it's going to be stuck in my head all day long. Then I'll be like, I won't sing it. Let's just say I'm not a singer, but no, 100%.
And Animaniacs was also like, is it Simpsons that had a different intro every time? Their song would even change.
I don't remember. I remember like Pinky and the Brain was like right on after that. I know that their intros I think would sometimes change. But that was a long time ago, so.
Right? And now they just skip all intros after you watch the first episode because you're watching 30 in a row. So
Yep.
there you go.
Yep.
Well, awesome. Well, kind of getting back to the topic on hand today, we're going to talk about phishing. Why don't we just kick it off with what is phishing?
I can give a little brief description. So phishing is a type of what's known as social engineering, which is essentially a tactic that's used by cyber attackers, malicious actors, who are attempting to get information from individuals, organizations, essentially by tricking them into doing something that they, if they knew what was going on, they wouldn't do, by clicking on a link, opening an attachment, giving out certain information, sensitive information, and that is done via email. There are other types of social engineering like phishing, which is via phone, smishing, which is via text message, different things like that. But that's just sort of a general broad overview. So.
Awesome. And just to clarify too, we're talking pH phishing. And if anybody's seen Trolls, it's like the pH fat. Yeah. That's how we're talking. But yeah, the smishing is an interesting point. And anything to add on to that?
And also like the band and the Ben and Jerry's, PHISH.
Which are
they
slightly
make
friendlier
things
than
more
what we're-
associated and memorable to other more positive things. I don't have much to add. It's really a tactic that a nefarious actor uses to elicit information, access, or gain access, that kind of thing. So it's really a dovetail into what Ashley said.
Awesome. And I know that within cybersecurity, right, that we have all of these stats, all of these different things of kind of why are we even talking about it? Because we live in a world, right, where I'm sure both of you are like, yeah, that's what phishing is, and we deal with it every single day. But is it common for people to know what phishing is if you go outside of the technology world?
I think that the term in and of itself is probably not as widely known. I mean, everyone at this point will have received some kind of phishing email, text message, phone call. It's very, very, very common. People don't necessarily know it as that term, but they would certainly, once you explain to them what the term is, be like, oh yeah, I've totally gotten those before. So for sure.
So you
I
mean
think
when they're
one generation above us, maybe I'm the oldest of the group, but one generation I think would just call it scam emails or something like that.
Yeah.
It just happens to have a term now that
Mhm.
makes a lot more sense when you think about what it relates to.
Mhm.
awesome, that makes perfect sense. So when they call on your extended warranty for your car,
Yes.
essentially that in email form, which yes, I still scam, but we're
Yes.
focusing more on the email, text message, those sides of things.
Mhm.
With that, when we're talking about how you recognize it, what are some of the red flags? How would you notice that something might be phishing?
So anytime you receive an email, whether it's to your company email address or your personal, it's always really important to stop, take a breath, and actually like review what it is that you're looking at. Because what people who use phishing as a tactic rely on is the quick click. The, oh yeah, this email is totally legitimate, even though I've only looked at it for 2 seconds. Let me click on that link. Let me open that attachment. They want you to make that split-second decision and not take a moment, look at what you're actually clicking on. So when you slow down and take a look at it, there's several things that you're going to want to look out for. Who sent you the email? Are you expecting an email from that person? Do you know that person? Is the email address that you're receiving the email from actually correct? So one thing that cyber attackers will do is something called typo squatting. So they'll purchase a domain, an email domain that looks very, very, very similar to a legitimate domain. Think of like Microsoft.com. But rather than being Microsoft, the O is replaced with a 0. So it looks very similar to Microsoft, but obviously is not. So then they'll send emails from that domain with the expectation that people are not going to look at it that closely. And they're going to assume it's from Microsoft and open whatever is included in the email. So looking for things like that, looking for things like display name spoofing, which essentially is like if I were to go to and open a Gmail, a Google Mail account, and just have some random email address. But I can give it a display name. I can say that my name is, Joe Biden. And then I send out an email. And if the actual email address is Gmail, but the display name when it shows up in your email inbox will say Joe Biden. So unless you look at that email address, you're going to assume that this email is from this person that's claiming to be. So looking for things like that. And then even if the email address is legitimate, that doesn't automatically mean that it's a legitimate email because people can get hacked. Their email accounts can get hacked, can be used to send out emails, to send out phishing emails to contacts, to people that these malicious actors who essentially like sit on these accounts and just review everything that comes in. They're looking for information that they can then use to send out these phishing emails. So, if you're receiving an email like that, are you expecting it from that person? Is it something that you would normally receive from them? And if it's not, rather than emailing them back and being like, is this legitimate? Call them up and be like, hey, is that actually from you? Because obviously if someone has access to an email account maliciously, they're just going to respond back, yeah, this is totally legitimate. So not super helpful to just email them right back. So.
And I would add, most companies that would, one of the key pieces is, or let me retract a little bit. Legitimate emails won't typically ask for sensitive information by email. So a bank or will have a resource for a secure link for you to access your account. They're not going to say, hey, what's your social security number? Or what's your key? And a lot of companies will even add that in their legitimate emails to say, we will never ask for this. So everybody is kind of trying to combat this phenomena that, and the misspelling in the emails and the spoofing of domain is one, but sometimes you'll see in the text, if you need to go that far to see further, that your name or something legitimate is misspelled. And I mean, I know I misspell stuff all the time, but it's a little bit further than that. Looking for and to be spelled with an E or some derivative, it's really great to have a harder to spell or utilize name, because it's very often misdone, and that can be a red flag as well. There are a lot of red flags, but to add on to what Ashley said, always call, always just picking up the phone. I know we're all getting away from using the phone as a phone, but to follow up to say, hey, I'm expecting this, or I was expecting something similar. Did you send this? Another piece that, to expand on what Ashley said, is anything that demands urgent response, absolutely red flag to me. If this needs like 30 seconds to respond, I automatically pump the brakes. Whether it's a personal or company email, let's just take a breath here, and really look at what's being sent. There are always times that there will be something very urgent, but more often it's not going to come by email.
I'm glad that you brought that up, and I was going to share. So over the weekend, I received my first text message that I knew that was phishing. And just from our internal training, we talk about the urgency, and I'll just kind of read this briefly, but it says it's from the US Post, and you have a package that's been on hold for a long time. The package will be destroyed soon, so please update your address immediately, is what I got. And I took a screenshot and I sent it to our director of cybersecurity to be like, hey, look at this. This is what I got. But it was interesting because the link was shortened. I know, and a lot of times we're like, hey, hover over that link to kind of see what that address is. So I thought this was very interesting. But one of the things, I'm an Apple user, that they've done too is like the sender is not in your contact list. So it's like not somebody that you have saved. So I thought that was kind of interesting that you talked about urgency. I was like, I actually got something. I wanted to share it with the people on the podcast. So it just kind of like fit right in. I'm like, I'm going to talk about this. So
I'm looking now, Tara. I think I got something similar.
Really?
Right, I was going to say, I think I got something, but I have to laugh. Your package will be destroyed. And I'm like,
yeah. Hopefully
wow,
it's not anything fun.
But I think that's an interesting point when we're talking about urgency, right? Is even the phishing tests that we do internally or things that we've gotten, there always seem to be that little bit of extreme that, yeah, it's like, oh, you have 30 seconds. But do we have other examples of things that we've seen that we're like, yeah, that's clearly phishing. That's what that is. Because I know off the top of my head, right, I get PayPal spoofs all the time, Apple account spoofs to my non-Apple account, things like that.
So if you ever read like a social engineering book, or even, I guess, books on like the psychology of influence, they kind of like walk through some of the broad categories that, or tactics, I guess, that can be used to influence people. And a lot of those are used by these malicious actors. And one of them is urgency, which kind of plays into the idea of scarcity. So something not being readily available, or FOMO, as some people might like to put it, fear of missing out. So that's why you sometimes will get phishing emails saying, hey, we're giving away a free iPad, but there's only a couple left. Click here to go enter, things like that. Or you need to claim it within 2 hours or something like that. Also, authority is a big one. So getting emails from your purporting to be your CEO or your boss, asking you to do certain things. People establishing a relationship with you, so like a trust relationship, because you're more likely to do things for people that you like and people that you trust. So establishing that relationship, and then asking you to do something that you probably wouldn't do for a stranger, or something that you don't like, even if it's just a relatively short interaction. So sometimes in the very advanced phishing emails, a lot of times we'll start out with, I'm not even asking you to do anything. I'm just establishing a rapport with you and trying to essentially find something that we have in common so that you can feel like I'm a trustworthy person and we like the same things and are similar in some way. And then eventually asking them, hey, here's this document. Could you review it for me for whatever purpose? And then that's where they get you. So sometimes they're a little bit more drawn out with some of these more advanced phishing attacks. And these are usually for like high-level executives or people that are more difficult to get to otherwise. There's some other ones as well, but those sort of spheres of influence or areas of influence tactics are used quite readily and quite successfully, which is obviously why they're used. So just kind of an interesting part of it, looking at the psychology.
Oh, definitely. And I think that rounds it out quite nicely that we can go through all these examples of, oh, I got this one phishing and this is what it said, but those spheres are essentially what you're looking for. Is there any other way beyond being like, this looks fishy, this is fishy? I know Tara had mentioned, oh, we're trying to hover over the links, but on your phone, there's not a hover.
So you can actually hover, well, not hover. You can look at the underlying URL of, it's a little bit more dangerous to do it because it does actually involve like clicking on it. So what you do is you just hold it down and then a little pop-up will show up and it'll show you the actual URL. But if you do it really quick, you're just clicking on it. So don't do that. So you got to hold it down for at least a couple of seconds, and then that should pop up and not actually open the link. But when in doubt, just delete it. I mean, if it's not something that's super important, just delete it. I mean, you obviously, like if it's an organization email, a corporate email, send it to your IT, send it to security. If you really want to like dig into it, there are things that you can do to take a look at like where the email is actually from. So emails are essentially like digital mail in the sense that they have envelopes with address information. So the information that you see in the actual email doesn't really tell you much about the origin. Like that information can be spoofed, can be whatever. So you can actually pull those, that envelope information is called like email headers is what they're called. And you can take them from Outlook and go to, there's various different websites that have free tools that you can just plop those headers in. It'll analyze them for you, and then it'll pull up essentially a bunch of information that it's pulling, and it'll tell you where those emails actually originate. So the IP address. So if you do that, you think the email might be not legitimate, you pull that information, you go and see like the actual IP address, and you can do an IP lookup. And if it turns out that that email is coming from like Russia, or that email or that IP has been flagged as malicious, that's a good indication that email itself is malicious. You can do something similar with like attachments. You can like run them through like file analyzers. VirusTotal is a good website that you can use for that. So it'll just take a look at whatever is attached and tell you whether or not there's anything malicious within that document. So a couple different ways to, do things on your own. Obviously, like we talked about, looking at grammar, spelling, the attachment of itself, if it has an attachment, because, any type of attachment can really be used for phishing purposes. PDFs, Word documents, HTML files, whatever. But sometimes you'll see documents that appear to be one thing but are actually something else. So as an example, if you took an image like of the PDF symbol that shows up when you have a PDF file attached to an email, just like took a screenshot of it and then just put it in email at the top to kind of make it look like it's been attached, and then embed a URL in it. When I click on it, I'm not opening attachments, actually just going out to a link. So if it doesn't quite look legitimate, I mean, like, sort of trust your instincts on some of that. Like, you know what some of this stuff is supposed to look like. You see it all the time. So just being like, yeah, that doesn't quite look right to me, you're probably right. So just kind of trusting your own intuition on some of that can really come in handy. So
Now, I know we always joke. We joked last week with Todd and Nate and Matthew about their tin hats, but essentially we're saying the same thing, to be like, be a little paranoid.
Yep.
Even if you think it might be legit. And yes, there's all those great tools, but Anne, it'd be interesting to hear from you on the compliance side of the house of, like, if it was a business and you're saying employees, hey, do this, what would be the best practice? What would you advise business owners and leaders to tell people to do?
Delete. If it is legitimate, and I will say, I think one of the best tactics in this is not just like the delete advice or the call, is to start on the front end. If you have resources that you can train with, whether that's simulated phishing, just continually help your staff help themselves. So much of the training out right now gives everyone an opportunity to look at, in a safe environment, or even fail a phishing test in a way that it inspires further investigation for a layman user, a tech user, rather than a security minded person. Just getting people to get in that mindset to be suspicious, to do that double check. And this kind of comes full circle to how Ashley started, in that take a pause. Just absolutely take a pause when we're looking at these things, that it can be absolutely devastating to do that quick reaction. We've all seen or heard of different companies wiring money as a result of a phish, and that's gone. That, especially on a small to medium business, that can be devastating. That can be just like shut down a business. So taking that few extra seconds is essentially a bargain, saving you money, right? It's in the long run, just taking that big breath and trying to analyze a little bit, being suspicious, and really just going that extra mile to, does this even make sense? No, our Todd would not send me an email at midnight unless there was probably, like, our CISO and COO would not send an email then unless that required action, unless there was a call or something like that. And then practice that, if that makes sense. Don't be the person that's sending a email that's requiring immediate action or requesting immediate action without calling and don't be the problem yourself in getting your emails deleted by doing suspicious actions. Here, click this link really fast. No, no, don't do it. So
I think that's my favorite advice so far. Just don't be suspicious yourself, first of all.
Yeah, that's good advice.
Love it. And I know that we're kind of getting down time. So lastly, the second part of this was reporting phishing. When we say reporting phishing, I know we're like delete, 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 delete. What is the reporting piece of phishing? What do we mean by that?
So there's some organizations use particular types of software that allow you to just click a button within Outlook and report emails straight from there. KnowBe4 is an example. But depending on your organization, you may or may not have that. So your organization may have certain processes set up that allow you to report that email. The one thing that we generally say, though, is do not forward the email to random people in the organization and ask them if it's legitimate, unless that's like your actual process. But even forwarding the email itself, we talked about headers before. If I forward the email onto someone else, those headers essentially get messed up. So I can't like check, the person who receives the email can't check the origin of that email because you forward it to them. You can save it as an attachment and then add the attachment to that email and then send it to them. And then they can look at it that way. But yeah, when in doubt, delete it.
I use the smelly sock analogy all the time in that we don't want to forward this. It's in that same vein of asking someone, you just smelled a really gross sock or whatever, asking someone else then to smell that sock and ensure that it's still stinky probably isn't the best method of validation. So we want to make sure it stays contained. We'll put it in the laundry ourselves and call to see maybe if someone wants to check it out.
All I can think is Monsters Inc., the 2314 or whatever with the smelly sock. That's all that's going in my brain now. But I'm like,
100%.
100%.
2019. Yeah, that's great.
Oh,
Hey, Kelsey, do you mind? I just had a quick question because I know Ashley and Ann have a hand in internally what CIT employees are trained on, but how often are you guys testing us? Because I know I just got one this morning and it's kind of like a fun game, that we pause, like you talked about. I'm like, total phishing. I'm pushing the button and I get like the gold star for the day that I'm like, I didn't fail and I passed. But I think it's a good thing to note of like, how often do you need to test employees? Because like you had mentioned, that's where all this starts.
We probably test more frequently than a lot of organizations. There's actually more than one campaign set up. So some of them we have sort of like a broad campaign that's targeted to everyone in the organization. And then we have individual little campaigns set up that are targeted specifically to your department. So that we have particular email templates that are used depending on what department you work in, because obviously you're going to be working with different products, within different contexts, I guess, than other departments. So I believe the org-wide one is every 2 weeks, and the other ones are every week. So it's quite frequent. And then if you fail one of them, then you are tested more frequently. So
I think ours speaks to the importance that our frequency and scheduling speaks to the importance we hold on educating our employees. And I know we get a little bit of pushback from some, and I don't mind. I love hearing it. How often are we even doing this? That's not how you phrased it at all, Tara, but we do get that. But I just think the more the better. It gives us more opportunity. I know with some oversight agencies, like in financial industries, are asking that. Some insurance applications are asking that of their organizations. How often are you doing this? And annually isn't a choice that on the application, or they want to see at least quarterly but I think that's going to evolve as well.
Mhm.
Spoilers, looking forward to the future. And no, and I will say, as somebody that takes the test, when you do get the one wrong, it is horrible. And it was definitely when I was like on my phone, not paying attention. And I was like, should have slowed down. This is a life lesson. I now have a lot of empathy for anybody that clicks, because that's when it happens. It's not when you're sitting on your computer paying attention. It's when you're on your phone at 10 p.m. at night being like, yeah, whatever, this is great, click, click. And then you're like, oh, snap. So thank you for the hover over the link in your email on your
Yeah.
phone. Now I'm like, just don't check it on your phone. Just don't do it. It's not worth it.
Well, and I don't think people shouldn't like feel bad about clicking. Like, anybody can fall for these emails. That's the thing. Some of them are just very well tailored. So, don't feel guilty about it. Just like take it as a lesson. Remember what you've learned from, that and doing the training, and then, just apply it going forward. That's all we're looking for. So
keep on going. No, and yeah, I don't think the user friction has been anything crazy. Even if we
Not
say,
at
hey,
all.
we've done it internally, I'm like, I don't feel like I feel like now I'm just like, oh yeah, nope, that's probably phishing for somebody else. Oh, that's something else. And I'm like, I feel more confident instead of being like, am I just being paranoid? I'm like, I'm supposed to be paranoid. So
yeah.
here we go. This is fine. I'm doing my job. But
Great.
awesome. Thank you guys. I know we're getting down on time here, but just to recap, we covered what is phishing, pH phishing. I loved Anne's. It's like fish food, the Ben and Jerry's. That'll be our nice positive reminder there. We talked about all of the different red flags, all of the different, right? Ashley, what did you call the different spheres? What are those technically termed?
I think they're like psychology, spheres of influence, areas of influence, something like that.
I was like, there was an official term for these laws.
I don't
and
know if it's really
whatever.
official, but yeah, so the books usually talk specifically about influence and I don't know what the realms of influence. I'm not even sure what they use specifically, but something
Some
like that.
scientific term. Yeah, we'll look it up. We'll put a link. It'll be great. And then obviously what you should do with those. Don't forward, delete, have a process in place, test. It's totally worth the user friction to save the amount of money that it would cost for just one person clicking one link. But if anybody has any additional questions for our lovely speakers today, or anybody that you've ever heard talk in the podcast, you can get a hold of us at info@cit-net.com, or of course, we're on the web, cit-net.com/podcast. There's a lovely little form, not phishing, I swear, where you can submit a question and we will get that answered. But thank you, Anne. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Tara, for joining us today. And we'll be back next week with another Tech for Business podcast.